So for this week on CyberSchool, we're covering a topic that we get quite a bit in our sales department and our technical support department, and this is a little bit more of an advanced use case for some of our products. And that's integrating it with fire panels or just general alarm panels. So today we'll be going over how to successfully integrate fire alarm panels with CyberData's SIP devices. Right now we've got two products pictured here, but there's three real products that you could use for this particular application. So when you're thinking about your emergency notification system, just thinking about things like, say, your overhead speaker system, it's really powerful, but it doesn't have a lot of the times the automatic kick on and the automatic capability that you get with an alarm fire panel system. Just because you've got those smoke detectors located all over the place, and as soon as the temperature gets to a certain, it gets to a certain amount, or there's smoke detected, the system can just kick on automatically, and that can be really powerful if you pair it with your emergency notification system, your overhead speaker system, to kind of bridge the gap between the two of them. Because alarm systems can be such powerful notification tools, and if you enhance an already powerful notification tool with another notification tool, you get the best possible combination, and you can really do a lot with combining those different systems, and really activate either system with either end. So it's kind of vice versa. You can activate your fire alarm system with a CyberData device, or your CyberData device can be activated automatically by your fire control system. So it really kind of bridges the gap and really combines and marries these two powerful notification systems for the best of both worlds. So how would this work? Because this seems pretty fancy, and how would you actually go and implement something like this? At a base level, really, really simple. You could just use the onboard relay contact closure from something like a paging adapter, a paging amplifier, a paging server. I mean, heck, even one of our call buttons or a regular intercom. You could interface with that fire panel system to trigger the relay. That's kind of at a base level. And when we're talking about relays, just remember that the actual relay portion is going to be on the CyberData device in this example. And then there's a contact on the fire panel that's basically just two pins. And when you short them together, the same exact thing that happens when a relay closes, it completes the circuit, and then whatever it's connected to does something that fire panel can activate. So you can automatically activate that fire panel system, say just by calling a number on your phone system. Say, there's a fire outdoors. Say, they're mowing the football field, and for some reason, instead of bagging all the grass clippings, they're putting them in a big pile. And the groundskeeper for some reason throws a cigarette in there and it catches the whole thing on fire, but there's no smoke detectors or anything to automatically set off the fire alarm system. You could just call the number and either enter a DTMF code, or depending on the product, the relay can automatically trigger and a notification can go out. And depending on how that system is wired, it could potentially set off the fire sprinklers, or just set off the alerts, which could be just the local horns that are used, and then the ADA strobes that are required with most fire systems. So you get a lot of powerful capability just from, say, calling a number. But it can also work in a couple different fashions, where if you get a little bit smarter of an amplifier, this is something that we're encountering a little bit more often now, really with more modern fire control panel systems, especially with universities, where they've actually got almost notification systems actually built into the fire panel system, where it's not just used in the event of an emergency. It can actually, power speakers and make general announcements. So audio can actually be passed through from one of our devices into that fire alarm panel, and then thus onto all of the other speakers. And it can be used for just general announcements, but it could also be used for emergency announcements. So that way they could pair, say, if they've got the emergency notification system that's run by the fire panel system on the inside of the building, and then on the exterior of the building, they're using things like our IP66 horns or something like that. They could call a SIP paging server that would multicast the audio out, get that out to the paging, the IP66 horns that are mounted on the exterior of the building, while the line out audio from that RCA port could just be going straight into the alarm panel. So that way you get indoor and outdoor paging all through that one system. So it's a really, really powerful option. And depending on how that particular system works, it can even blink and flash any strobes that are connected to it. So you get that full-fledged notification system that everybody would know and expect from something like a CyberData product. And you can kind of pair that with your alarm panel system. But like I was saying in one of the initial examples, it can also work in the inverse, where the CyberData product doesn't necessarily need to activate the alarm. The CyberData device can be activated by an alarm going off, and you get that kind of automatic capability that you don't really get with our products. Our products are smart, but we don't really have any sensors yet that can detect, say, things like glass break or just a regular smoke detector or a vape detector or anything like that. And by pairing the sense input on a CyberData product, the inverse of a relay, where it's not actually closing but expecting something else to close, can be triggered from that same fire alarm panel. And when you're talking about fire alarm panels, they generally have two different sets of outputs and inputs on there. They've got the regular relays on there, which will, just like a CyberData relay, are normally open or normally closed. And depending on an action from that fire panel, they can either close the normally open relays or open the normally closed relays. And then you can wire that into a CyberData device, and that device can take an action based on that relay closing, which gives you that automatic capability. So for example, say you've got a smoke detector in a bathroom, and some teenagers at a middle school, they're playing with matches because they got some matches, and they're throwing them into a trash can full of paper towels. Don't ask me how I know this. It's not like anything like this happened at one of my middle schools. But the trash can could catch on fire and could trigger the alarm automatically just because of that smoke detector that would be in that boy's bathroom. And that would automatically trigger the system because of how it's all wired. And that fire alarm panel system can just go and close its onboard relay, which is hooked into the sense input of, say, a SIP paging adapter, a SIP paging server, really any CyberData product, and that CyberData product can play the message that's associated with that sense input. So as soon as that contact is closed, our device can take an action, and it can either, with, say, a SIP paging server, it can multicast that audio out across the network to enhance that emergency notification capability, because of course the fire control panel system already has, it's got speakers, it's got horns, it's got strobes, but you can supplement that, say, with the exterior of the building, maybe facing the street, or maybe towards the blacktop or the play area, or in that example that I was talking about with the groundskeeper mowing the football pitch. It could actually go and make the announcement over there where the regular alarm system might not cover, because with most of the time with fire alarm systems, they're concerned about the inside of the building, not always the outside. So if you pair that system with your CyberData system, you can kind of cover all of your grounds. So let's talk a little bit more about the specifics of these different cases. So a CyberData device, of course, can activate an alarm, and that's really going to be driven by the relay contact closure from a particular device. That's just going to be our onboard relay closing, and then the fire panel, depending on how that fire panel is set up, can take a different action. When you're dealing with our onboard relays, it kind of depends on which particular product you're working with to understand how that onboard relay can be triggered. Things like, say, our intercoms, our call buttons, our strobes, or our paging amplifiers actually have a relay that can be triggered via DTMF or multicast. And multicast, it's selectable per priority. So your general background music or your white noise that you'd say might play during testing periods or anything like that won't necessarily activate that onboard relay. But if you get one that's sent at priority level 9, the emergency level, it can automatically trigger that relay. So as soon as that multicast is received, it can go and trigger that relay. Some other products support things like our paging adapter and our paging servers support the onboard relay, of course, on multicast receive with the paging adapter, but they also support it on local audio. So that means anytime that any audio is received at that particular device, again, the paging server or the paging adapter, it's automatically just going to trip that onboard relay. So that could be something like RCA line-in audio, say, for example, if the yard supervisors are using walkie-talkies and they've got a radio base that can actually receive that and output it, the device could go and actually activate its onboard relay as soon as it gets that audio. Or generally, if just a phone call is made to the unit, it can go and activate it. But those kind of activation terms can actually potentially lead to false alarm if it's not done correctly. In my personal opinion, and I think in general, DTMF control is going to be the best option to prevent a false alarm when you're just dealing with things like this, because just the local audio capability, things, for example, say you get a new secretary that might be doing the morning announcements at a school, unknowingly calls the wrong number to one paging server over the other, and calls the paging server that's actually connected to the fire panel. That could go and trigger a false alarm, evacuate the entire school, depending on how that fire system is set up. It could call the fire department. It could automatically dial 911. Then you get all of the emergency services sent over there just because somebody misdialed a number. So really, I would recommend that anytime that you're going to be considering connecting one of our devices to a fire control system, and our device is intended to activate that fire control system, DTMF control is going to be the best way to go about it, which is why products like our paging amplifier or one of our strobes or a call button or an intercom are ideal for that, because they've got the DTMF control for that onboard relay. So let's talk about audio pass-through as another option. This is something that you'll encounter with a little bit more modern amplifiers, more modern alarm panels, where they can actually act as an amplifier. Of course, they're not going to be as powerful as, the full, multi-building suite amplifier that you can go out and buy from Bogan or Valcom or Pulse Audio or what have you. Those are really fancy amplifiers, and they're designed to be amplifiers. And when you're dealing with a fire panel that has an amplifier, it's not usually both married together. It's a fire panel that can amplify some speakers. It's something that's more adapted to it's adapted to something rather than built for something. So that's just one of the things you want to consider when you're going to go one of these routes. But using the audio pass-through, you could use something like our paging server, paging adapter, or our paging amplifier to go and use the line out capability. And depending on the fire panel that you're going to be working with, the paging adapter or the paging server might be best suited for that particular connection, just because of their output capabilities, since those ones are designed to work with analog amplifier devices. Since they've got two different audio output capabilities, the unbalanced RCA style that's a 10,000 ohm connection, or the balanced TEL style that's a 600 ohm, it gives you the capability to connect to just about any analog amplifier out there. So it gives you a lot of capability there. And just by passing that audio into the fire panel system, it gives you complete control and capability that you would normally get, that would normally be reserved for, say, just fire alarms. You can use that same capability just for general announcements, which might actually help offset cost for a new paging system or a new paging upgrade, as the schools or different locations are kind of evaluating what to do for their overhead announcements. It can make the system really, really powerful, and depending on this particular system that you're implementing, it could even activate the strobe to the fire system. Hopefully they can illuminate in different colors. There's something like an LED instead of, at least I know when I was growing up, they were just these blindingly white lights that, oh my gosh, if you looked at them, I swear they were worse than looking at the sun. My gosh, I remember going blind in fire drills because I was a dumb teenager and I would just stare at lights and stare at the sun. But they become very, very powerful systems, and they're capable of enhanced notifications when you pair an alarm system and a general paging system. So that way you can just supplement your coverage capability. But the main thing that this is going to require is, of course, an alarm panel that actually supports something like this. This is something that we've really only encountered in the last couple years. So I think it's probably safe to say that most fire alarm panels don't actually do this. We've only encountered this with one or two universities that, are going out and shelling out a ton of money on a really fancy fire system, which, I mean, heck, they should, but it's probably not something that you're going to encounter in your daily evaluation as you're going out to sites and kind of helping spec things out for customers. I find most alarm panels don't support this. They basically have, the regular fire alarms that you pull, and they've got that cool little glass thing you break in there, you get dye all over your hand, and they got got smoke detectors, and that's basically it. But as these systems evolve and they get more focused on, instead of it just being a fire panel, it becomes a full emergency notification suite. So they're doing things like glass break sensors, God forbid, gunshot sensors, things like that. These systems are getting more and more advanced. And I think as the future comes to become the present, we're going to see more and more alarm panels actually support onboard amplifiers to power different speakers. So finally, let's talk about the last different option and implementation that you can go and use one of our products with, and that's the alarm system that's actually going to trigger an announcement. Personally, I think this is going to be the best option in terms of, say, a device activating the fire system or one of our devices being activated by the system. This is one that's going to be generally used and pretty easy to implement because most alarm systems have these onboard relays to actually go and activate different products that are connected to, because these things are built with say triggering, say like in the olden times, ATAs or different page port adapters that could go and trigger, call automatic calls to 911 or automatic calls to the local fire department to dispatch those people out. All of them have onboard relays on there as kind of that legacy style of implementation, because they don't know what kind of location they're going to go into. And our CyberData products can take advantage of that because we can work with these onboard relays and activate based on that relay closing. So again, when you're specifically going to be doing this, you're going to be working with this sense input on the CyberData products, and it's featured on most CyberData products. I think there's a couple that don't have it. The first one that's at least jumping to mind is our 4-port zone controller, because that one doesn't have any inputs on it. It's only got outputs, but I'm sure there's probably others out there. But for the majority, most of our products actually support the sense input. And all the sense input does is when those two contacts are shorted together, again, because it's just the opposite of a relay, when a relay closes, it completes the circuit. A sense input is waiting for that circuit to be closed, so that way it can take an action. And when that does occur, when those two contacts are shorted together, it tells the device to, okay, what do? I play the audio file that's associated with the sense input, and it either goes to, depending on the product that you're using, it could just go out the standard line out. So say, for example, if they've got a regular analog amplifier just nicely mounted right by that fire alarm panel, it can just send out that audio straight to the analog paging system. And again, that can probably cover your blacktop area, maybe your playground, an athletic field, or maybe the parking lot, just different places where your regular fire system might not be covered. But if you connect it to, say, something like our paging server, it can actually multicast that same message out and even play it out the line out capability to any IP-based paging equipment that might be on the network. So, for example, in that same scenario, say they've got IP66 horns mounted on a light pole that's out in the exercise field area. They could go and get those notifications out there. Or if you've got some horns or, say, paging amplifiers that are mounted out in the parking lot, maybe by the big stadium where everybody comes for the football games. You could go and get those announcements and get that coverage out there in that area where your fire panel might not be able to cover, just depending on how that was implemented. So again, all of these different options really help bridge the gap and supplement that existing fire alarm panel system and the existing emergency notification system to really bridge the gap and make it the best of both worlds. So let's talk a little bit more about actually making this work, because I've been selling this, okay, these things will work, but let's talk about some specifics on this. So when you're dealing with the fault sense inputs, as you can see from our connection diagram here, these are going to be pins 1 and 2. And those are the 2 pins on that green screw down terminal. We call it the interface. Sometimes it's called the page port. But it's just going to be those first 2 pins there, pins 1 and 2, that'll be connected to the onboard relay of that fire panel system. And as soon as that fire panel system activates, those pins, a circuit is completed there, and our device can take an action based on that. And the audio output can come from either, of course, the line out RCA connection pictured there, or pins 3, 4, and 5, the actual tel audio out. So those are the 2 outputs that you would use there. They could go to, say, just a regular amplifier, or it could go to the fire alarm panel system if it does have one of those amplifiers, if it's a little bit smarter. And say you wanted to go for the relay contact closure, where the CyberData device will activate the fire panel system, you would use pins 6 and 7 on there. So that way, when the device is called or it gets that line in audio, it can automatically just trigger that onboard relay and the device can take an action at that particular time. So another option that I kind of briefly discussed, but this one's really, really powerful, especially for pairing it with fire panels, is our paging amplifier. And this is the screw down terminal, kind of the drawing that we have on the side of the silk screen of the actual case. And this is really great for just understanding which particular pinouts you want to use. So if you're going to be using the actual audio output of the paging amplifier going into the panel, you would use pins 7 and 8 on there. They'll line out, and they're very nicely labeled with the positive and negative on there, so you know exactly what polarity you're working with, whichever pin you're working with. And in the inverse, for example, if you wanted the line in from the actual alarm panel or any other audio source, you could use the line in pins, which would be pins 5 and 6. So if you're dealing with kind of a smarter amplifier that might have, say, some audio files actually loaded on the fire alarm panel, they could say, please evacuate to evacuation point number 2 or number 3 or alpha or tango or, you know, whatever the heck they want to call it, it can actually play that through the paging amplifier. So you can kind of join these things together and get that notification enhanced through it. And then finally, if you want to use the onboard relay, if you want that DTMF control from a CyberData device to activate that fire panel system, you would use pins 3 and 4 on the screw down terminal here. And again, that would be the actual terminals to go and activate the fire panel system. So you'd call the paging amplifier, enter whatever DTMF code is necessary, it would trigger the onboard relay, and then the fire panel can work its magic. So that's kind of how you would actually make these connections work and the actual pinouts and stuff that would be used for these two different applications. So let's just talk about a very brief example. This is one that, you know, I kind of had dreamed up because this did happen at one of my middle schools. Frankly, it was actually one of my friends that was playing with matches in the boys' bathroom and unfortunately set the trash can on fire that was full of paper towels. And thank goodness that there was actually a smoke detector in that particular bathroom. And that smoke detector, because it's all wired back to the fire panel system, it activated the fire panel. And that set off a nice loud alarm. Thankfully, that was kind of during a break. So there weren't many kids in the bathroom. And, you know, most students were kind of buzzing around. You know, it was the 10-minute break in between classes. So there was a time to, you know, go out and get a bagel or, you know, just kind of socialize with your friends in between classes. We got a nice little break because there was a fire and everybody had to get evacuated over to the athletic field. But what could have been enhanced with the fire panel system at my middle school, they could have had something like our SIP paging server, which could have had its sense input triggered by the fire panel, which could have then multicasted the alert out to the various different IP devices that could have been on the network at the time. Unfortunately, this was way back before CyberData had started doing IP paging, so of course it wouldn't have been possible back then. But hopefully now they've got a better paging system that can help get that notification out. But this is just a general application or an implementation that could be used by combining a regular fire panel system with a notification system. So that way, as soon as that fire detector detects something happening, it basically the notification can almost move at the speed of light, because as soon as that smoke detector goes and activates, the fire panel gets that. They're all, you know, probably connected with regular copper wire, so that's going to those electrons are going to travel at the speed of light. That onboard relay will close, and our device will take action, start multicasting immediately. So you can get that notification out nearly at the speed of light, just to be able to get that emergency notification out to those people that need it, so anybody around that bathroom can get away. So in a summary, let's kind of talk about alarm panel and paging integration. They can be both really powerful on their own. Of course, with an alarm system, especially for fires, they're really, really powerful in that they can almost be activated instantly, whether it's, you know, some teenage boys setting fire to a trash can of paper towels in the bathroom, or a newer chemistry teacher playing around with you know, different demonstrations for his class and maybe making a little bit of smoke in his AP chemistry class and setting off the fire system and the sprinklers and causing some damage to books. They can be really, really powerful systems, and as well as that regular paging system that's going to be getting out those morning announcements and the bells for the different students, they're really powerful systems on their own, and combining them really supplements the alerting capabilities that you have of these different systems. Where the fire system is going to be really great on areas where there's going to be a high concentration of people on campus, things like classrooms or just kind of common areas in between buildings, it's going to be really powerful there. But things like athletic areas, stadiums, places where they didn't really expect to get that notification out, you can supplement that by combining both the regular paging system and the alarm system. So that way you get the best of both worlds, where you've got the full-fledged IP-based system that's paging to your stadium, that's paging to the athletic field, while using that known good and awesome fire alarm panel system in all your classrooms to get all those notifications out. So it makes it really, really powerful. But one of the main downsides that a lot of places will encounter when they try to go for things like this is the capabilities are really dependent on that particular fire alarm panel. Where if they've got kind of an older fire alarm system, maybe installed in the mid 2000s, it might not be as advanced as they would like. It might not have an onboard amplifier. It might not have a capability to actually take in line-in audio to play it through its horns, or the different ways that it can make announcements. Or maybe it doesn't, it just can't even do any of that. It'll probably at least have an onboard relay to go and trigger other devices, so that way you could actually sync the CyberData device to your fire alarm panel. But it's going to be really, really dependent on what that actual fire alarm panel can do. But combining these, even if capable, isn't without any potential issues and pitfalls, because depending on how this thing is implemented, it gives the capability for false alarm, which could just be just as simple as somebody, a newer staff member at a particular school or a building could make a call to the wrong number. And because that was, say, a paging server or a paging adapter that's just using that enable relay on local audio setting, it goes and automatically triggers its onboard relay as soon as that call is received, and you get a false alarm that evacuates the entire building. Hopefully the sprinklers don't go off. Maybe they do. Then you've got all the other problems that come with that, but it could potentially lead to false alarms. So you really want to do your due diligence and really understand how you're setting this thing up to prevent any potential false alarms, which could lead to just general panic, but it could also lead to potentially lost work hours, lost student time, or just students causing chaos. Because if a student gets a hold of the phone number to call it, they're going to wreak all havoc. And if they're trying to do something during state testing or anything like that, they could really lead to potential issues. So alarm panel and paging system integration is not without its pitfalls. It's super powerful, but it's kind of a dual-edged sword. If it's not implemented correctly, it could really lead to some potential issues. And finally, we haven't done this in a while, but I use some terms that might not be common knowledge for everybody. So two terms I want to go over is DTMF, that's dual tone multi-frequency, and it's basically just when you press the different buttons on your phone, or most of us are using soft clients on our computers now, it's actually going to send that that tone, which in the old school days of those of us that remember old analog phones, it would actually send a combination of different tones, hence the dual tone. Now it's all done automatically with packets and all that kind of boring stuff, but that's what DTMF means. It's just when you're pressing the different 0 through 9 on your telephone keypad to go and trigger different options. What you use to enter your voicemail password, or if you're calling your bank and you have to enter in all the super annoying buttons as you're trying to select something so you can talk to somebody. And the final other term that we use today is multicast. And multicast is just a one-to-many networking process that can send data from one single location to many different potential devices on a local area network. So it's really powerful, and it's used for a lot of different networking processes, but in the main implementation of VoIP, it's mainly just going to be used for audio. Technically, it could be used for video, but mainly today, I'd say 99% of the use cases that are using multicast in a VoIP environment are just going to be using it for audio.
Thank you for watching this edition of CyberSchool. If you have any questions, please get in contact with our sales department. They are available by email at sales@cyberdata.net or by phone at 831-373-2601 extension 334. Please make sure to like this video and subscribe for more content like this from CyberData.